Okay, everyone, hello and welcome. Today we are joined by Alyssa Roenigk to talk about the upcoming episode of In Real Life Under the Helmet, which she hosted and which launched on Sunday on Scripps News. It's now available on streaming and YouTube, so we will link it in the show notes. Definitely check it out. It's really, really fun. So Alyssa is an author, broadcast journalist, and senior writer for ESPN, and basically an all-around legend. If you look her up, you will see her website has everything that she's done. It's so cool. And so in this episode, she kind of gets behind the scenes and spends time with drivers like Jamie Chadwick and Leah Block, who are also fellow friends of the podcast, to really understand the landscape of women in motorsport today. So welcome, Alyssa. We're so excited to have you.
Thank you, guys. What a nice intro. And thanks for the kind words about the documentary. Yeah, it was a lot of fun to work on.
We loved it so much. And we're excited that it seems like we're embarking on a bit of a new era for women in motorsport. And the episode does a great job at showing sort of the state of the union, what's to come. So for those who have not tuned in yet, what is the key message, Alyssa, to you of this episode? Is it hope for the future? Is it that there's still a lot more to be done? Like, what's the main takeaway here?
Both.
Good. We love that.
And as women who, know this sport intricately, that's a really big compliment. So thank you. That means a lot. If we did a good job of making an episode that you enjoyed and someone who's coming to open wheel racing completely fresh also enjoyed and learned something, then we've done our jobs. But I think it's equal parts, right? There's a lot of hope for the future. I think, one of the things you realize as you cover sports and really cover anything is that talent is equally distributed around the world. Doesn't matter if you're man or woman, what your nationality or color or background is, opportunity is not. Mm-hmm. And so one of the things that I was really hopeful about coming out of this reporting was that there's a lot of work being done to close the opportunity gap, right? And so in doing that, there's, when you, and especially at the grassroots level, maybe more than any sport, this sport, when you have 20 spots at the top, I mean, there are more NFL quarterbacks than there are Formula One drivers. That is crazy.
Wow.
And so you really need to get, you need 100 girls and 100 boys at 10 years old at those karting tracks. So then, they can sort of equally keep moving up the ranks. And so there's a lot of work being done to create more opportunity for young women. And there's still a lot of work to be done. There are 0 women driving in Formula One. So I think that shows, when it's 50, one of my favorite quotes is that Ruth Bader Ginsburg quote, when will there be enough women on the Supreme Court? When there are 9, right? And so when there are at least 50-50 women in Formula One, then you can say like, okay, we're there, or we're getting there. Or maybe when there's 20 women in Formula One racing. So right now there's 0. So I think that's pretty clear. There's a lot of work to be done, but a lot of work is being done. So yeah, it's a good question. I think it's pretty 50-50 right now.
Yeah.
So speaking of what work has been done, it is a very hopeful sort of note that was struck in the episode. What are you most hopeful for about women in motorsport?
Well, I mean, one of the things that was very surprising to me is, spending time with Jamie Chadwick. I think, Leah's so young and wide-eyed, and, you sort of need that generation who have had these doors open for them, who don't see barriers. And then spending time with Jamie and realizing, how successful she's been, how talented she is, and still how freaking difficult it has been even for her to get into an F3 car. And so she is really one of those special people who is spending almost equal parts of her life chasing her own dream and trying to make the road easier for the women coming behind her. She has a driving academy for young girls in karting. That made me very hopeful. I think other women seeing the relationship she has with Leah and with the other young women and how truly, honestly, she wants to see them succeed and to do things to help them succeed, I think is really important for other women to see that and to see that you can chase your own dreams while also helping to lift up other women around you. Men have been doing it for a really long time. And so I think it's really cool to see her reaching down and pulling other young drivers up alongside of her while she still truly does have aspirations to, to get into an F1 seat, an F2 car. What else has me hopeful? So one of the things I learned talking to Jamie, that I never really thought about is when you look at IndyCar, NASCAR, all these, other types of driving, and especially in the States, there have been women and women role models. And,
Yeah.
in speaking with her when she came over here and started driving in Indy Lights, how much more difficult it is physically to drive an Indy car than it is a Formula car.
Yeah, because of the
This tiny woman, I mean, I'm 5'2", and I'm looking at her in the eyes and I was like, whoa, I expected her to be this big strapping woman, and she's tiny and she's having success in a car that is physically much more difficult to drive than these Formula cars. And so when you realize it's not about size, it's not about her strength, it's about the opportunity, right? Put that girl in an F3 or an F2 car and arguably she will have some success. And so that was pretty interesting, seeing how Indy and even NASCAR are really trying to get women into the sport, and how far Formula One has to go to catch up with, that was surprising to me, that here in the US, and she kept saying, well, in the US they give you time to succeed. In Formula racing, they want you get one chance, and
it's
there's
very
this,
cutthroat.
yeah, and there's this, in the piece I wrote for ESPN that was a lot more about Jamie and Leah's relationship. One of the things people kept saying to me was sort of this unspoken issue, which is that every team wants a woman in the driver's seat. They want to say, like, we have the woman. They're afraid of it being the wrong woman or the right woman at the
Yeah.
wrong time. And if she doesn't come in and win immediately, she's going to set back all women everywhere. However, that happens to men all the time.
Totally.
And
They're not held to the same standard at all,
absolutely. Yeah.
which is definitely frustrating. And I can only imagine from, the perspective of the women who are actually doing it. So talk to us about the process of making this episode. What attracted you to the story? How did you zero in on Jamie and Leah and Jess Edgar and the profiles that you chose to showcase?
Well, I have to say, I was incredibly lucky. I work for ESPN full time, and I got an email from Meg Hilling, who was my producer. So one of the really cool things about this episode of In Real Life and the ESPN piece is they were both edited and produced by women. So you had a woman who was reporting and hosting, but you also had women behind the scenes, which was very, very cool. And as you can see, you met Elise. You have women working on the production, on the PR side. I mean, there's just a lot of women working on this episode, which was very, very cool. But Meg was familiar with my work and had reached out and just said, hey, In Real Life is we want to do some sports themed episodes. We have this idea. This was completely Meg's idea. She had started doing the research and she reached out and said, would you be interested in reporting and hosting this? And yes, it took a little bit of work to get an approval and a yes from my bosses at ESPN. And I was really fortunate. They said yes and sort of put me on loan. I felt a little bit like Jamie Chadwick. I was like, yeah, Williams loaned her out to Andretti. ESPN loans me out to Scripps News for a bit of time. And so the nice thing that came of the reporting and work was a really beautiful long form piece for ESPN that really we would not have gone after or been maybe thinking about if not for Meg coming to me and asking me to report this story alongside of her. I kept telling her and Zach and Kevin, everyone I worked on with this, that I felt very much like a guest in the In Real Life house. And my goal was just not to break anything while I was there. And really, it was such a cool experience. I had such a good time, but we got this great ESPN piece out of it, this beautiful documentary, a podcast we did for ESPN. We're, doing things like your podcast. So this has been, so much has come of those, 2.5 months of reporting. And so what we did was we went over to the UK for a couple of weeks, went to Williams, went to Roden Carlin. We spent time with Jamie at the gym and walking around downtown London, spent time with Leah. Then we went to, where did we go next? We went to Monterey for some Indy Lights testing out at Laguna Seca. We went to St. Petersburg for the Indy race, but also it was the first Indy Lights race of the year, Indy Next now race of the year. And then did some additional reporting over Zoom, just sort of catching up with everyone after, Leah's first Formula One Academy race as Jamie was continuing on with her season.
That's incredible. We actually met Jamie at Laguna Seca for the first time.
Right.
And so, yeah.
At the same time.
Yeah.
We were all there together.
I know.
Oh, I wish I'd known. How cool.
Next time for sure.
Was there anything super unexpected about the process or things that you learned having maybe, you know, you've been familiar with the whole world throughout your career, but anything that kind of blew your mind or was really eye-opening?
About the actual process of making the documentary?
Or just learning about this, you know, the uphill battle, so to speak, of women in motorsport right now?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, really, Jamie was really impactful because from the outside, you look at this woman and she was so incredibly talent. I mean, she won every season of the W Series, right? And even in, I called a lot of my colleagues who cover Formula One exclusively, and some of the guys who write about Formula One for us or for ESPN. And, they kept, they even asked me, like, why isn't she? We don't even understand why she's not in a Formula 3 car, Formula 2 car, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so that was meaningful that, those, from afar, it was a big question that I had. Certainly money, it's an expensive sport. The
Yeah.
closer you get to it, the more you realize, like, why does anyone go into the sport, right? Like, you think about growing up, how expensive gymnastics is, or,
Yeah.
my family, my husband's family grew up in motocross. That seems impossibly expensive. And then now you start moving into cars, and then, it is impossibly expensive. And so for someone like Jamie, who's coming from a regular middle class family and is doing it on talent and scholarships and winning, and there were a couple of years you're winning $1.5 million and you still cannot, you know, with sponsors and with the money you're winning, put together a ride at the next level, to be around her and she's still so positive and
Yeah.
that belief in yourself and belief that you can still do it. But to know how do you not get so frustrated? How do you not give up, right? How do you keep believing in yourself? It's really powerful. I really do believe, having been over here and sort of seeing how the indie program works compared to Formula, I'm very hopeful that we see an American team expand the grid in
Oh,
Us
yes.
Formula
too.
One. I was standing with Jamie at Williams when two things happened while we were there. One was the news that Lewis was leaving.
Oh
Wow.
my
And
God.
so she got a text before the news broke. And she sort of looked up from her phone and was like, whoa, Um, and then also, Andretti not being approved to be added, to the Formula
Yeah.
One grid. And seeing her process both of those in real time was so interesting, because in theory, both of those could impact her
Oh, yeah.
out
100%.
to Formula One, right? And so, yeah, but I do believe that Andretti, they have as good a chance of anyone. And I spent
Yes.
some time talking to Mario um, in St. Pete,
Okay.
and Michael, but it was cool how much belief they have in her, and to be talking to one of the few Americans who've raced over there, certainly the most successful American in Formula One, and to see how excited he was about the prospect of her being maybe that Andretti, one of the Andretti drivers that brings them into Formula One, was also very cool.
That's such an exciting prospect for us, obviously, as
Right,
Americans and as
right.
women, but we are fully backing the Andretti train, and it does
I'm
seem
with
like
you.
they're fast moving, so fingers crossed for them. We want to switch gears a little bit to you and your background. So you've spent a lot of time covering motorsports. You've served as a reporter at the Global Rallycross Series. In 2015, you actually competed and became the first American driver to win the Moroccan Women's Rally, which is
Yeah.
incredible. It's the toughest all women's off-road rally in the world. How did you find yourself in that position? What was that experience like? Would love to hear a little bit about that.
Oh, thanks for. I mean, once again, being asked by someone who I really respect and admire, and feeling very lucky about it. But I had known about the Rebelle, or sorry, the Rebelle is now. I've done the Rebelle a few years. That's now the American version of the Gazelle.
Mm-hmm.
So the
Yeah.
Gazelle Rally in Morocco, I'd known about it for a few years. I'd always wanted to go and cover it. And there were a few years where we did an X Games, a Winter X Games in Tignes, France. And it's sort of on the, it's very close, sort of, and the timing worked out. So I was trying to figure out how I could go from there and go cover this rally. And one of my good friends, Chrissy Beavis, who at the time was the navigator for Travis Pastrana and for Subaru in Rally America, was trying to put a program together to go and do this rally. And it's a navigation rally. So it's a painfully meticulous way to drive a vehicle through really dangerous terrain, but it's really about going in a straight line. So you wake up in the morning at like 4 a.m. and you do a lot of math, and you're navigating with old school. You turn your phone and computers in on day one, and you don't have access
Oh,
to anything
whoa.
for 14 days. So
Wow.
that was also a big deal, right? To get approval to do that. And so you're navigating with with compasses and maps that were drawn in the 50s of the Moroccan desert. I mean, it is a
Oh my
wild
My
God.
time.
gosh.
And so Chrissy had always wanted to do this. She had done this race with an athlete, and she wanted to go back and do it again. And Chrissy is one of the most brilliant, talented navigators and drivers in rally. And she wanted to go back and win. And one of the things about that rally is you have to do it. It's as much about teamwork, communication. You're in a car with someone for 12 to 15 hours a day, and sometimes longer. You're
Unbelievable.
sleeping out. So it has to be someone you want to be in a car with for that long. I mean, we watched best friends never speak to each other again.
Oh, no.
It was, and so she started working with Subaru to put a team together, and she reached out. We got to know each other while I was a lot better while I was the reporter for Rallycross. And she just reached out and said, I think you'd be good at this. And I think I would want to sit in a car with you for 15 hours a day. Would you be willing to do this? Here's how we would train for it. And I mean, I said yes before I really knew even what I was getting
That's
into.
awesome.
And so the Subaru program ended up falling apart. And for a while we thought we weren't going to be doing it. And then Mercedes came in and they were introducing the Sprinter van in the US. So I started training to learn how to drive a 4-wheel drive Sprinter van through sand dunes. And
That's amazing.
it was incredible. But yeah, we both mostly, I started running a lot more in the sand near my house in Santa Monica at the time, and started taking, navigation courses, going into Glamis here in Southern California and driving a lot. And, the navigator is the rock star of that team. Your job as a driver is to not break the car over 14 days, because if you don't get to the finish line, you don't finish. And
Yeah.
it
Wow.
was really all I wanted to do was get her that win. And when it was over, yeah, I mean, how cool, I was, in Chrissy's life, it really mattered. In my life, I was like trying to explain to people, no, this is really cool. No one really understood what it was, but yeah, how cool to be able to be it was the 25th anniversary of the race. We were the first American women to win it. And it was without a doubt, one of the hardest things I've ever done. And then Emily Miller, who put that program together, started the Rebel Rally here in the US, which is
Amazing.
also very cool. And I've done that a few times as well, and haven't won it. We've come in second.
One day.
Yeah, that's still on the horizon. So maybe
On the bucket
that
list for
carrot
sure.
to go do it again.
Yeah.
Tiggy, I wonder if we would survive. Tiggy was a math major in college, so she
Oh my gosh, you guys are perfect.
at the navigation.
I could do the navigation, maybe not the driving.
But
That's
hate
perfect.
I hate adrenaline. I hate driving, so we'd have to find someone else.
Oh, well, the best team are, a driver who also, I love math. I want, and so helping, and then a navigator who also can get in there and drive sometimes too. Cause and spot.
Yeah, incredible.
I'm pitching you guys to go. And
Let's go. So last question for you. I mean, obviously you've had an incredible career spanning all sorts of sports, from X Games, football, the Olympics, and more. And of course, now you've been working in motorsport, and you had this incredible episode. Do you think having worked on all of those different sports helped inform the episode that you did? And how do you think motorsport is unique to all the other sports that you've covered?
Oh, incredibly. Yeah. I to the first part of that question, look, I mean, especially the Leah Block part of that story.
Yeah.
That was, I have different memories than she has, right? From the time she was a little girl, I remember Lucy and Ken bringing her and her siblings to the X Games and to Rallycross. And I remember her driving her cute little pink electric car around the Rallycross pits, and, was friends, am friends with Lucy, her mom, and was friends with her father. And, there were few people in action sports I respected as much as Ken Block. I loved interviewing Ken because he was, he had the best bullshit meter of almost anyone I'd ever met. And he a good, if you asked, he held you to a really high standard, right? if you're interviewing him and, if you ask a good question, oh, that's a good question. I remember almost, you almost feel proud, like
Yeah.
you ask a lazy question and Ken was going to call you out on it if you were on live TV or not. Right. And so I just always liked that about him. He was when the camera was off, I think he was even better. He was not naturally comfortable in front of the camera. He taught himself how to be because he knew how powerful that was, obviously, but just one of the most creative people and thoughtful people. And it was always an honor to sit and have a conversation with him. And so to bring years of, and Leah's whole life was informed by action sports, which is something that really my career has been rooted in. And so I think the way she sees the world very much was informed by being around skateboarders and motocross athletes and BMXers who fall a million times and get up one more and believe anything is possible, right? And so I think all of that really informed it. And then of certainly all the work I'd done writing about Formula One or IndyCar informs what the experience I was having covering these women. I write a lot about women's sports as well. So I think that also really carried over. And then, I think the thing about motorsports and it was so nice to be able to interview Lucy Gold and some of the other women around the sport is that you see the driver, but there are few sports that are there is maybe no bigger team than a Formula One race team, right? The first time I went to a Formula One race was in Monza in like 2006, maybe 2005, 2007, somewhere around there. And standing in that garage was mind blowing.
It's unbelievable.
It's unbelievable, right? Having been in a NASCAR, an IndyCar garage, you think like, how many, you sort of look over, you're like, what is the driver doing? And so I think that is the thing that makes motorsports really special is that it is a massive team effort. And if one part of that team isn't firing on all cylinders, you're not going to win that day. But that driver both gets all of the accolades and praise, but if your mechanic or your engineer or anyone else falters, that driver is also carrying all the blame, right? So it's a lot of pressure on this one person, but man, it's a big team. And I think that is something that is different from other sports.
Yeah. We talk about that all the time. It's such a good point. And I love what you said about the blocks as well. We got to know Leah a little bit. We sat down with her ahead of Miami and it was just such a lovely conversation. We met her mom as well, who's incredible. And she was joking about how, she grew up in the rally world and the extreme sports world. She's like, I can wear my white pants to the track for F1 Academy and like, they don't get dirty, which is really sweet.
That's pretty funny. Yeah. You would never wear, I don't even own white clothes.
Exactly. Well, Alyssa, thank you so much. This was an incredible conversation. We are so excited for everybody to see this episode. We can tell how much love and care and thought went into it, and people are going to love it. So thank you for taking the time with us.
Yeah, thank you. It was so nice to meet both of you and it was an honor to be here.